We chose those words carefully, making value for America. Making value for America. We don't, as Dan said, want this to simply be another manufacturing study. That's not what this is about at all in the final analysis. I mean, we could do hours on what the manufacturing economy is or isn't and whether or not it could ever employ the number of people it once employed in any meaningful way to contribute to either growth of jobs or growth of GDP in the country. But we know very well, without it, without something to fill in the middle, it's a problem. It's a serious problem for the country, if not the world. I mean, this will happen not just here. I mean, you know, everyone keeps thinking that somehow we've got these huge buffers up and that what happens in the United States doesn't matter in wherever, you know, China, India, Botswana. That's just not true, as you have seen. We've effectively interwoven a global network of everything, of economies, of thinking, of technology, of capability. I mean, you know, this is what you wanted. You know, you wanted a global environment. You wanted to be able to do everything everywhere in the world, and this is what we got. As a result of that, you know, problems here will show up somewhere else. Problems somewhere else show up here. To think there's no contagion is just, it's absurd. I mean, it just isn't going to work that way. Time constants may be different, but you know, problems are going to be the same, and perhaps solutions are going to be the same. And some of you are going to tell us about some solutions that work somewhere else, and maybe they can work here as well. Again, just context, right? Things for you to think about. Yeah, in some ways, I want to torture you with this, you know, just to aggravate you or to agitate your mind to be thinking about really what's going on. Everything is changing. Everything will continue to change. So why wouldn't you want to be studying this? It can't be the same anymore. It just can't be. There's new ways of doing everything in the world. New ways of working. You see that happening every day. I mean, you know, think about the context of the old Sloan model. So, you know, you want to double your business, do you have to double the number of people? I worked at IBM, most of you know that. We were a $100 billion company, 400,000 people. I used to say, really? You want to be a $200 billion company with a million people? Is that really what you're thinking? Is that the model you want to use? It doesn't make sense. It's almost completely unmanageable, you know, in any context. So what is the new way of working? Lots of distributed platforms, lots of distribution of everything, and there's lots of centralization of things too that go right along with it. Sometimes that's how you get this distributed capability, is because it's centralized. I mean, the cloud. What is the cloud fundamentally, other than, you know, the way it was when I started out, you know, 100 years ago in the information technology industry, right? We had a cloud then too. It just happened to be a different kind of cloud. It was like a unique cloud. It was like a proprietary cloud. It was like, you know, but that's the way it was. So everything old is new again. Everything goes back to the way it was. And new business designs. Anything is possible. Companies can go, that are vertical can go horizontal. Companies that are this diagonal can go that diagonal. You know, everything, because of technology, has been uncoupled and unbuckled from everything, and therefore we're more fleet of foot. We're more facile to do whatever needs to be done to kind of respond to the problem and respond to the market. I think of the planet this way. How do you think of the planet? It's an instrumented planet. Do you know what that means? Every year we make 1 billion transistors for every man, woman, and child. 1 billion transistors are made every year. And we got more men, women, and children every year, so we're making more every year. Another way to kind of visualize that, if you're looking for something to torment yourself with, we actually make more transistors, not chips, transistors, every year than we harvest grains of rice. I mean, I actually did those calculations, so I know it's approximately true. I know it's approximately true, and I defy anybody to come back to me with another calculation. So That just what does that say? That says where you are is just going to accelerate in the future. I mean, there's going to be more of this stuff available for you. You know, Dan kind of alluded to this thought about instead of against, be with in his remarks. Most of us have read that little booklet, RAM, Racing Against the Machine by Bryn Jolison and McAfee. If you haven't, I recommend it to you. It's a great little read. It kind of torments you in a different way. It kind of aggravates you to say, you know, maybe this is right. Maybe all of this instrumentation, you know, maybe all of these computers, maybe all of this information technology is something that we need to harness in a different way to create value. I shouldn't say just create, right? I want to say making value for America. I want it created and captured. You know, it's the job here isn't just to create it and then let somebody else benefit from it. The job here is to create it and you know, look at me. You know, I did a great job of actually turning it into a business. Interconnected kind of goes without saying. You know the world is interconnected. It's going to become even more interconnected. There's no reason to think that it dials backwards. It dials forward. You know, 2 billion people, 3 billion people, 4 billion people connected to the internet. Millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of businesses. And devices connected. Everything about you is going to be connected, right? I mean, here I sit here with a Fitbit on, you know, a cell phone in my back pocket, a Fitbit over here, 2 computers over there. I mean, and that's just here. Forget about my cars. I mean, my cars are even more interconnected. So it's going to continue, right? It's going to continue. What do you do with that? And then the question is, what intelligence do we create out of that? That's the environment, not just for us. That's the environment for the rest of the world. You know, and in some sense, we have to look to the rest of the world as we charter our own course here for making value. We have to be realistic about what the rest of the world has done and is going to do in the future. They're not going to stand by and say, oh, yes, let's just pass all this to the United States. Let's make sure that they're fully employed. Let's make sure that, you know, their GDP is growing. You know, we don't worry about that for us because they'll take care of us in the end. I don't think that's the philosophy at all for what's going on in the world. And then, you know, I admittedly stole this from IBM only because I did this work before I left IBM. You know, we hope it does become a smarter planet, to be honest with you. We hope we do create that intelligence, not just data, not just information, but intelligence. Do something with it. Create value with it. Make a difference with it. You know, we can go through all kinds of then and now types of things. These are just the 2 interesting examples that we kind of put up here to kind of amplify what I just said to you. I mean, there's many things that we could be picking. We just happen to pick these 2. Dan alluded to this chart. I love this chart. We're going to footnote that this is not my chart. This is OECD data, right? Dan described this for you very vividly in his comments. You know, stare at it for a while, and it kind of says something to you. Now, this happens to be percent labor force. There are comparable charts that talk about GDP. GDP of the world, GDP of a country. You see what's going on, as Dan so appropriately. You know, did you do this, Eric? Was this your idea? Did you kind of start to manipulate this 100 years ago? I don't think so. It's not the way. Nobody manipulated this. Nobody kind of made this go this way. Value migrates. Value migrates, and you don't control it. And you've got to be aware of that, and you've got to be thinking about that all the time. It doesn't mean that, you know, agriculture is a bad thing and we don't need food anymore. I mean, you know, are any of you eating less? I mean, is anybody kind of like, well, I don't do agriculture anymore, you know? No, that's just nonsense. It's highly productive. You know that. You've seen the productivity story that goes with, you know, we'll feed the world with the fewest number of people. Same thing seems to be happening in the goods sector. We can have all kinds of arguments about this, and we should here in this meeting, which is why I stick these charts up here. But it looks like that's what's going on here too. You have more stuff, don't you? You're clothed better, you're housed better, you're moved better. All those physical things, you got more of them. You got more possessions now than you did yesterday. So it's not that you don't need more goods. You do need more goods. You just don't want to pay for more goods. You want to pay less for your goods. And the value may be somewhere else. I mean, we've seen value move, for instance, in the telecommunications industry, from the cell phone to the network. I remember, 25 years ago, spending $2,500 to carry around a 5-pound brick so that I could talk to 4 people. I thought that was very cool. Very cool, right? I mean, you thought the value was in that little freaking brick you held in your hand. The fact that you could hold it, spoke highly of you. That's just nonsense. You don't think that way now. Nobody thinks that way now. You say, well, you give it to me and I sign a contract and isn't that the way it works? Didn't it always work that way, Ann? No, not really. Not at all. Value migrates. And while we're focused on the United States, and we could fill in that whole chart with every other country that's part of OECD, it happens in Japan, it's happening in Germany, it's happening in other economies. It'll happen in China. I don't know when, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I mean, this is the way it goes. This is just the way it goes. Why? Your thoughts about why that is happening. There'll always be a few good farmers, and there'll always be a few good makers. That will be true. So somebody can survive in there. Can we put, well, let's just stick with our country. Can we put the big piece of 350 million people to work there? Is that where we say, become a farmer? We want you to become a farmer. You telling your daughters, your sons that? You'll feel hungry. Okay. Yeah. So you get the picture, right? I'm through tormenting you on this slide. And you'll be back to, and that is true. And that is true. This is not necessarily the most accurate accounting of anything. And Carl Schramm, sitting in the back there, knows this because he was supposed to do some work on this for the president, and he never did. I mean, he kind of copped out on it. We were trying to segment. You can say this yourself when you get to speak, Carl. You can defend yourself. But he was trying to figure out this whole services sector. Like, so what is that? I mean, everything is in there. Can't you stratify it? Can't we refine it? There's high value services. There's less value services. Can't we do something to say it's not as homogeneous as it is, and it's not as homogeneous as it is? He was supposed to do that work for me, and he never did. So I ended up going to work for him for a while, so he got even with me. It's pretty straightforward. I think it's, it gets emotional here. And I want this to be an emotional meeting. So where is the American dream? What happened to it? More importantly, can we rejuvenate it? I mean, do we want to rejuvenate it? Should we rejuvenate it? How would we rejuvenate it? Are our better days ahead of us? I mean, I think so, but can we prove that? Can we help people understand that? Or are they behind us? Or, as some of my colleagues say, does it matter anymore? Is it relevant? I mean, this is something that we have to address as we come to the end of our work here. Where is it? Where is the opportunity for the future for mid-skilled America? I'm not worried about you. You are not in this group. You are somewhere else. But you can't be where you are if they are not addressed. If we don't do something to figure this out, to point to the future, to point in the direction of here's what you do, here's how you acquire new skills, these are the skills that you need to acquire, this is what needs to be done, this is the relationship that government has to have with employers. Got a great example of that in New York State, who was nice enough to come here and share their thoughts with us. What an amazing success story is going on in New York State as a result of the relationship between the state and industry. They're kind of like an open for business state in so many. I won't want to say anything more because I want to hear from you on this topic. What are we going to do about that? Is that part of the plan that we need to kind of get people to focus on. Maybe this problem, Dan, can't be dealt with at the federal level. Maybe it can only practically be dealt with at the local level. Maybe that's part of what we end up thinking about, assuming that you really want this to happen. And I suspect you will. Think about these things as we're going through the day. Ask your questions. Engage alone. Dan gave you a list of questions to consider. I posit these for you to consider as well as we go through the day. We need your input. Where and how do you want to make a mark? We haven't started to write this. We've certainly been compiling our thinking, so you can be influencers of where we go with this activity, of what and how this activity makes sense. That's why you're here. That's why we're having this conference. So it's not a done deal. We just don't need 6 quotes from each of you to kind of slip into page 7, 37, 95, and 42. That's not what this is about at all. Okay. Yeah. Are these the positive catalysts for change? A lot of you have a lot to say about entrepreneurs. I have a strong feeling about this issue of inclusion. This is what it all is all about. I mean, the whole idea of diversity of thought. It's very hard to preclude people a priori from trying to solve a problem. We don't know enough about the problems that we're going to have to say, Hari, stay home. Nothing you have is going to help us in anything we do. You are not required. It's just nuts to even think that way, but we do. Too often, we do. And this idea of taking different things and finding... So our underlying thesis is, unless we remain an innovation leadership country, unless we remain a leader, whatever we're going to propose is useless. Without being the innovation leader, we won't be able to create enough value to sustain ourselves. That is an underpinning of our thinking. And that gap is closing. We don't always know how to measure it. We don't always know, precisely where we are against it. But the sense is that gap is closing. And if we're not careful, once it's by us, it's like a power curve. It's awfully hard to catch it. Awfully hard to catch those power curves. I'm going to stop here. I think this says it well. You'll all have copies of these presentations. If you don't have them already, we'll make sure you have them for your consideration and thinking. I, for one, I've got 2 granddaughters. I want it to be a better world and not a worse world. I want the American dream to go on. I want this to not be, you heard the word tipping point. This could just as likely be the tripping point as the tipping point. I don't want that. I don't want this to be our tripping point. So not to be overly dramatic about this study, but if ever I felt we could do some good for everyone, in this country, perhaps even in the rest of the world, it's with the work that we're going to do here and that you're going to help us with. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for listening.